good morning to everyone. Warm welcome from Budapest. Today, we are going to discuss the Czech election from this weekend, and we are going to discuss about the results and the future prospects for the Czech Republic and for the Visegrad cooperation, but also for the European Union, but in a broader meaning. My name is Tamás Molnár. I'm a research fellow at the Institute of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and I have the privilege to say a couple of things about our panelists who joined us today. First and foremost, I would like to welcome Pavel Havlíček, research fellow from the Association for International Affairs Research Center. Also joining us, Vít Havelka, also from the Czech Republic, who is a research fellow at the European Institute for European Policy. Hello.
Hello.
And last but certainly not least, my dear colleague Nikolett Garai, research fellow also from the Institute of Foreign Affairs and Trade, also joining us. In the first part of our event, we are going to have a moderated discussion about the election results. And in the second part, I would like to take questions from the audience, which you can all pose in the chat box. During the whole event, you can ask us questions. We are collecting them, and I have the intention to ask them to our panelists. So that's it, and now we shall start the conversation. And my first question to the panelists would be, if you have to name one key takeaway from the election and one interesting development, what would these two be? Maybe Vít, if you would take it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and it's a privilege to be here. So that's just the beginning and the formalities. For me, the biggest surprising result of the elections is that populists can actually be beaten in the elections, and if the opposition manages to consolidate, create blocks, so that the votes for particular parties don't stay below the threshold, the 5% threshold that is needed to enter the parliament, then it is possible to concentrate the votes, and it is possible to beat a strong populist party. I think that's the biggest takeaway, and it's interesting also in the perspective of the regional development, where you have Hungary and, let's say, Poland, who have very strong parties. We can say populist parties, nationalist parties, and if the opposition manages to come up with some relevant narrative and manages to consolidate their force, then it's possible to beat those populist parties. So I think that's, in a nutshell, the biggest surprising feature of these last elections in the Czech Republic.
Thank you, Vít. Pavel, if you would take.
Thank you so much, Tamás, also for the invitation. It's my great pleasure. The same as Vít. So for me, the biggest surprise is, and that was, this is a big headache nowadays, it's the election of the Czech left. I will speak more broadly. So that is not only the result for the Communist Party that for the first time since 1948 did not enter the Czech or Czechoslovak parliament, or whatever it used to be in the past. So first, and then obviously the result for the Social Democrats, a party with 130 years history, the oldest party in the Czech or Czechoslovak, or the historical context dating back to the Austrian-Hungarian times. In fact, so both of them did not achieve the 5% minimum that was required. And I will extend that to some degree also to the sort of a center left or more progressive left, which would be the Czech Pirates, which from the 37 mandate that the coalition of Pirates and the Mayor's movement, the more centrist, more liberal of the two coalitions, democratic opposition coalitions, only achieved 4 out of the 37 mandates, which was caused by the preferential voting, which was really played strongly in favor of the other coalition partner, the mayor's movement, the STAN, which is more sort of closer to the center, more conservative, but has a very, very strong local and regional presence, which actually sort of played against the Czech Pirates after all.
Thank you very much, Pavel. Nikki, I know always it's a very unpleasant task to be the last, but if you can highlight maybe one takeaway and one surprising development, what would these two be?
Well, okay. For me, the biggest surprise was that the Pirates actually couldn't manage as seats as it was anticipated. And as Pavel rightly pointed out, they have lost 18 seats and their coalition partners, the mayors, accelerated their position very much in the parliament. That was kind of a bit surprise for me, let alone speaking about the results. I would say that viewing the whole election from Hungary, this very narrow results and this close score was also anticipated. But I wouldn't bet a lot of money that the opposition would actually win the most of the votes. It was a very close call. 13,000 voters were the difference basically, or votes were the difference basically, which is a very narrow margin. It was the most interesting election, I think, in the last couple of years, which I actually watched. So it was interesting to see the developments and see that when counting the votes, at first it looked like that ANO could retain the power. And I remember that when I was going to the television to talk about the details and the results, I had to check it from time to time, the incoming results, because even at 98 and 99% of the process of the votes, I had to check it all the time because it was such a close score. So basically that was a very interesting thing. And it is my duty to point out one other interesting development, which is the high number of women in the parliament. So the highest number of women get into the parliament during this election. So 1/4 of the parliament is made up of women right now, just like this conversation. So it's a proper representation of the Czech situation.
Before we jump up to our next topic, I would like to have one round of follow-up questions. For Vítek, you said that the strength of the oppositional parties were that they came up with a narrative. They had a strong narrative. In your point of view, what was this narrative is about? I'm asking about this center-right coalition of Spolu, if I pronounce it right. What was it in your?
I think it applies to both the coalitions that the elections were basically a referendum on Babiš's government, and this was present in the entire campaign, and it was basically only about whether Babiš will manage to create the next government or not. And because Mr. Babiš is so polarizing personality in the Czech Republic, and the Czech society, in the opinion on Babiš, is approximately split half-half, then the opposition parties were simply better equipped, and I think they managed to mobilize their voters. We cannot omit the fact that the turnout went up by 5%. So in the previous elections, it was 60%. Now it was 65. And that, for example, caused that the Šlachta movement, the oath, did not manage to get into the parliament. The same also for the communists, who have very solid electorate that always votes, but they are not able to address any additional voters. So by definition, the larger the turnout is, the more fragile the position of the communists is. So I think the turnout was the key, and the fact that the opposition managed to mobilize their electorate was a major difference. If you look at the regional turnout, then the districts or areas or regions, we call it regions in the Czech Republic, who tend to vote more for Babiš party, they had turnout around like 56-57%, whereas Prague, which is solely opposition, had a turnout of 70%, and that applies also to larger cities. So I think after 8 years of Babiš's government and also this power pact with Miloš Zeman, the opposition managed to gather their forces and simply convince the voters to turn out at the elections.
We are going to talk about the role of Miloš Zeman in a minute, but before we get there, for the Hungarian viewers, maybe to have an understanding, I have a provoking question for the whole round. Would you say that this center-right coalition, they call themselves the Spolu, would you label them as an anti-Babiš coalition? Is it the strongest thing what forges them together? Pavel, maybe if you would take that.
Yes, I think this was certainly something that was driving all the coalition. It was serving as a sort of glue. So if you saw some of the narratives that they were passing to the Czech society, it was always like, look, we need to stop the oligarchization of the Czech society. We need to stop sort of, like the clash of interests also vis-a-vis the European Union and the EU structural cohesion funding that is still flowing to, to some degree to Babiš companies and things like that. So really that was the big narrative, especially for the center-right coalition. It played an important role also for the other of the two coalitions, the more sort of centrist one, more liberal, the Pirates and the Mayor's movement, but they were also, at least at the beginning, they were trying to present more of a sort of vision, long-term vision. They presented a program of several hundred pages, so they really focused on the sort of program and policy agenda at the first place. But then actually they got so much stuck into the sort of battle between Babiš and the Pirates, especially that some of the program points actually even disappeared, I would say, to some degree, and it's turned out to be also, as Vít mentioned, more really of a referendum on if we want more of the same or we want to sort of go for the change. That was my interpretation. That was my perception of the situation.
Vít, please, you raise your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention also that Babiš played along the narrative referendum on Babiš. Because if you look at his campaign, he basically said, either it will be me, you know what I am doing, and I'm raising the pensions and like the wealth that you have. And on the other side, you have the Pirates who there was this famous sentence that they will send migrants to your cottages and homes, and the Babiš campaign simply made the entire elections as a referendum on Babiš, and so everybody played this game, and it was not just the opposition parties who wanted to frame the elections in this way. For example, I think that the more liberal coalition it took toll on their performance in the elections, because what they were strong at is that they are new, fresh, and they are more liberal, and they have like brand new ideas, but they were totally unable to present it during the election campaign, because it was all about either you vote Babiš or you vote against Babiš, and then you had somehow just in the shadow the more conservative coalition Spolu, who was not in the middle of the political dispute, and I believe that around like 30% of the voters who voted for one of those opposition parties, they decided who they will vote for during the last week, and they simply went for the stronger party that had a chance at beating Babiš as such, like in the popular vote, not just getting rid of Babiš. So I think that the smaller coalition, the more liberal coalition, just suffered from not being able to present their program, and that the entire debate before the elections just shrunk into the referendum on Andrej Babiš.
If I may add
Sure.
two quick things, I completely agree with my colleagues in connection with what has been said. I just want to reflect on one thing that I think what the Spolu coalition did really great were two things. First of all, like forming an actual coalition reduced the complexity in the political game, and it was easier for the voters to cast a vote to an opposition formation. That's one thing. And the second thing is that they did a really good job in distancing themselves from the other political entities and positioning themselves as the only viable democratic opposition force. And the Pirates and the mayors did that the same as well. But because the Social Democrats were in coalition with Babiš, the narrative, what they used was that they cannot really be a democratic opposition anymore because they are too intertwined with the politics of Babiš and Dano. So therefore, I think that somehow the Spolu could actually be regarded as the only viable democratic opposition that could be the force in the upcoming years. And another interesting issue is that, Babiš was rather firing the Pirates, I think, in the campaign. So this also helped the Spolu coalition to accelerate the votes, I think. So the number one evil company was the Pirates in the campaign of Babiš, basically.
It's a very pleasant thing for the moderator if he or she doesn't have to moderate run because it runs by itself. Pavel, you raise your hand, please.
Thank you so much, Tamás. Just maybe to draw on Nikolett actually points, because I definitely agree. We have a saying in Czech that if the two fight, the third laughs. So this is exactly what happened, and what really brought, I would say, Petr Fiala, the chairman of the ODS, the Civic Democratic Party, and the head of the Spolu Together coalition to the prime minister seat. That's going to happen as a matter of time, let's say. But this is exactly what happened. Babiš tactics to really fight with the Pirates all the time just so much blew back to him, because he liquidated the Pirates, but he also just left the other coalition completely, sort of in the middle ground, very comfortable for political parties not to be attacked, not to be so much mentioned, and to look as the rational force. This is exactly the main slogan, in fact, of the Czech Christian Democrats, Czechoslovak Christian Democratic Party, actually, as they still have in their name. That is the calm force. This is their saying, and this is exactly what played in their favor in the campaign. And maybe just to add to what Nikolett also mentioned, when she spoke about the sort of two coalitions, there were really a lot of sort of miscommunications between the Pirates and the Mayor's movement. As Vít mentioned, there were a lot of also program points that they lost on the way, under a lot of pressure from Babiš, under a lot of pressure also from disinformation, because they were the main target of the sort of disinformation ecosystem and conspiracy websites, attacking them as a sort of neo-Marxist and all what Vít mentioned as well. So here the Together coalition was in a much more comfortable position, and also to be very frank, they were also ideologically somehow much more coherent than it proved to be so in the case of the Czech Pirates and the Mayor's movement, where here and there the disputes actually emerged, and some were more funny than others. One was about ice cream that Babiš obviously used against them. And it was, what kind of ice cream do you want? Do you want a vegan one that was preferred by the Pirates, or a classic one, obviously coming from a more sort of still liberal, but a little bit more conservative, a little bit more centrist, the Mayor's movement. But there were some more serious ones, and Babiš was always there to sort of push back against that. So that's just to add on, maybe on a more funny note, what Nikolett was mentioning.
Last comment from this round, and then we will move. Next one, Vít, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't want to
please
destroy the entire debate. No, I wanted to mention that the tactics that Babiš chose were probably wrong. That if you look at the voters' movement between the parties, so if you compare who the voters voted for in 2017 and now in 2021, then I would say the more moderate voters went to the opposition, and the quite intense campaign of ANO and Andrej Babiš managed to attract voters from parties that are against somehow the system. So, for example, the communists, that's true that a lot of communists simply voted for ANO party. Then he managed to draw some voters from Okamura's SPD, which is basically Czech nationalist party, Czech nationalist racist party. And so he exchanged basically his electorate with a more extreme one, and he managed to draw from these extreme parties. But simultaneously, the moderate voters left him. And by doing so, he also destroyed totally his coalition potential, that he has the most seats in the parliament at the moment, 72, I think 72 or 73 seats, 72 seats. But he has next to no coalition potential, so he will never ever be able to form a government in this election period.
Before we jump into coalition talks, I would like to ask one question about the campaign. It went very big in the international media, the so-called Pandora Papers. Do you think what sort of influence did this investigative journalist results about Babiš money and this French castle had about the outcome of the election results? I don't know who wants to start. Maybe Pavel raised his hand first, so please.
Thank you so much, Tamás. Maybe briefly, a couple of reflections on this one, but we are still, I think, only analyzing what concretely this brought. It was just a week ahead of the vote, so there was a very turbulent time, and you can imagine how representatives of the ANO party, the ruling party, were saying, look, this is all conspiracy. Several hundreds journalists all across the world, they agreed against the Czech Prime Minister Andrej Babiš. Sounds ridiculous, but this is the narrative that they played actually. But more on a more maybe serious note, I think there were like two points to it. Obviously, there was yet another corruption affair that was related to the prime minister. We heard that before. He has been struggling with multiple sort of affairs on a similar note, be that the Stork Nest, huge affair that is ongoing for years already, be that the clash of interests vis-a-vis the European Union and the EU funding. But the more important for me, at least, was when you try to campaign for voters that out of which 4/5 are more than 45 and half of them are older than 60, and you try to be one of the crowd, one of the citizens, and then you have a castle in France and 16 or 15 other properties on the territory for 14 million euros, 400 million Czech crowns, that just sort of distance you from the crowd. You're not. You're back in the seat as one of the most prominent businessmen and oligarch. We may use that word. So that is one point. And another one, more on a serious note, there were some initial sort of surveys what that had actually done, and according to what the Czech television published, up to 8% of the voters of the ANO party actually decided to switch to another party. So that could be, these are still very turbulent times, and we need to sit down and analyze this properly. But one of the first surveys actually showed that up to 8% actually decided to switch and not vote for the ANO party, which would be very significant.
Before I give the floor to Vít and Nikolett, one provoking question to you. With regard to the fact, also still about the Pandora Papers, that the margin between ANO and this coalition of the right and center parties were something like 0.6%. do you think that the Pandora Papers made actually the difference, this narrow margin? And then you can also reflect on a broader sense about the papers.
Yeah, as Pavel mentioned, it's too early to say, but my instinct would say not that much. What it might have influence are two things. The first thing is that you have 1 week to go in the elections, and what you want to do is to mobilize your voters. And if you are struggling with a news scandal, you cannot basically focus on what your message is in the campaign. You just try to defend yourself. They managed to do that, I think, pretty well. The second point is that we all know, and even Babiš voters know, that our prime minister is not the least corrupt person in the world, and that he tends to find loopholes in the legal system. And they don't care because they think that he is a capable manager who is able to deliver and who is able to increase their living standard. So I would be very skeptical that it made any difference in what the ANO party gained. What it might potentially impact is the mobilization of the opposition parties, but I think it's still early to say, and I don't think that the data that the Czech TV showed are convincing enough to say, yes, it had a major impact or it influenced the campaign.
Nikki, what is your comment?
Yeah, I actually agree with Vít that it's difficult to say the impact of the Pandora Papers. I would assume, but of course I might be wrong, that since all the corruption cases were out there in the last 4 years, core voters of the ANO party, they were not really moved by another scandal, you know, so people actually got used to these issues, and I wouldn't say that this was the most important factor that caused this very narrow call in the results. I'd like to point here to an important aspect which hasn't been mentioned yet. We don't have to forget, or we shouldn't forget, that in the meantime, we are over 3 waves of the COVID-19. And I think this is one of the biggest variable that could cause not really the collapse of ANO, because they still have a lot of supporters. 27% of the population, it's still a huge number. So I wouldn't say that they have lost their appeal so much. But again, those voters that Pavel were talking about, the more moderate ones, might move to other parties. And I think the COVID loss and everything which is connected to the COVID-19 crisis can be written on the bill of Prime Minister Andrej Babiš. So I think it's a better explanation why this could happen. But of course, the Pandora Papers is also a fact that we have to take into account. I don't know if the others agree with that.
I just wanted to ask, that's an important aspect you mentioned about the COVID-19 crisis management. I think it's also relevant in every country in our region. Do you think, one question first to Vít and then to Pavel, that the crisis management of the Czech government played a role in the outcome of the election, or it didn't really had an influence? What's your comment, Vít?
Well, it definitely did play a role. I don't know if it played that much role in why the voters of ANO party actually turned out and voted for ANO party. It had probably more impact on the campaign as such and the narratives. Andrej Babiš, he wanted to utilize the European recovery plan to create one big cancer center in Prague, and the campaign was probably originally set up to promote a better healthcare and cancer prevention, etc. But if you have 30,000 people, or something between 30 and 45,000 people who have died recently, like within half a year before you start the campaign, you cannot talk about the healthcare, and therefore they just had to go with a negative campaign and raising fear against the pirates who might become with the ruling party. And they simply had to resort to this narrative, and they had nothing positive that they could offer, which was meant to be the cancer care and healthcare. So it might have impacted the campaign itself, but the fact that there's around like 30,000 or 45,000 that died, and that there was a total mismanagement of the pandemic, I don't think that it played a crucial role in the decisions that the voters took. And one more point, I don't know if it's just the fate, but the difference between the ANO party and Spolu party was around 30,000 votes, and the number of the people that died during the pandemic are also 30,000. So I just feel, you know, this is just a matter of a pure coincidence.
Interesting coincidence you mentioned. Pavel, do you have anything to add? Not in this magical number narrative, but
I will not go there myself,
yes.
but an interesting coincidence, as our Russian friends say, совпадения не думаю. So coincidence, I don't think so. So not to go this way, but I will point to something that actually Vít already hinted on. So you would see in terms of narratives that the opposition was very much using the mess that the ruling sort of government coalition actually was doing when they changed the Minister of Healthcare 3 times. They planned to change for the fourth time, you know, so enormous level of turbulent development just on the side of the management. Don't forget that the Minister of Healthcare, Adam Vojtěch, he already was in the seat once. He was kicked out. He got back, and then he announced that he's going to Finland to be the next Czech ambassador in there. How does that look like? Not great, right? So that's one thing. Another one, and this was reflected in terms of the narratives. So you would see always the opposition when they are even including pirates under a lot of pressure, then they use COVID. Look, you guys messed up. So that was always, they brought it up, you know, when this was important, and they consistently used it during the campaign. And you would just see the opposite from both the ruling party, ANO, but also Social Democrats, saying, look, we did what we could, you know, it was difficult for everybody and so on. And then that is my interpretation, and please do not be don't be offended. The ruling party of Andrej Babiš was using tokens, different sort of topics here and there to switch the page. And one of them, and that is my strong feeling, was the Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán Viktor and his visit to Czechia. This was just to switch attention from the long-term structural, as we hinted on, but also the sort of COVID-related, really awful situation that we had in Czechia. And they were introducing topics, be that migration, be that visit of the Hungarian Prime Minister, be that something else. And they were trying to switch the topic from what was always haunting the party down.
Let's jump into coalition talks. In the meantime, I would like to encourage all our viewers to post their questions if they have any. So about the next Czech parliament, in comparison to the last one after 2017, it is going to be a less fragmented one. We have the most seats has ANO, then we have the center-right Spolu coalition. We have the two-party coalition from the independent mayors and the Pirates and the far-right SPD. For me, with a German-focused background, this SPD is very funny, because when I was preparing for this round, I thought Social Democrats, and then they have this nationalist far-right narrative, so it was a little bit confusing, but anyway. So it's going to be a less fragmented one. What kind of coalition possibilities are there? And do you think that Andrej Babiš is, in political sense, already a dead man? Who would like to start? Pavel raised his hand first, so please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Tamás. And I think it would be great to hear also from Nikolett how that looks like from outside. But I think from inside, that's pretty much a clear picture. We know who is going to be the candidate for the prime minister, a leader of Spolu, Petr Fiala. We know how the talks usually go. So the foreign ministry goes to the opposition. Well, the smaller coalition partner usually. Now there are talks about who gets the finance ministry. That used to be also in the hands of the second or third coalition partner, but this time it looks that it will be also the ODS, the most influential party within the Spol coalition. So them getting prime minister seat, also foreign finance ministry seat, and some more. Then obviously the second in a row, just one mandate down. Don't forget the mayor's movement, they have 33, and ODS, I think they have 34, so it's very small margin. They would be getting also very prominent seats, likely the foreign ministry or some other influential ones, and obviously very notable the Ministry of Interior, that always goes sort of to keep the parties in balance to the party that doesn't hold the prime minister's seat. This time there will be also yet another very influential post, that will be the head of the Chamber of Deputies, the lower chamber of the Czech Parliament, because that is going to be very influential person in the sort of nomination talks. We don't know what happens with the Czech president Miloš Zeman, but the constitutional power of the head of the Chamber of Deputies is very prominent as well, because for the third attempt to appoint a prime minister to compose the government, it is actually the head of the Chamber of Deputies that decides who gets the third attempt, who is nominated to try to compose the government and ask for the vote of confidence. So here there is another very influential post this time. So I think we are more or less clear that this will be the two democratic opposition coalitions, which have a very comfortable majority of 108 seats out of the 200 that are there in the Chamber of Deputies. And we have since late Saturday evening also a sort of memorandum that these parties are not going to negotiate with anybody else, including Mr. Babiš, including with Mr. Okamura of the far-right party. So I think quite a clear picture, but a big question mark to me, that is the role of the Czech president and his position in the whole sort of post-election mathematics.
Thank you. What is your external view on Czech internal developments here?
Yeah, so it's a tricky question, because if you read the foreign language media about the Czech elections, I think people or experts couldn't really believe that the two opposition formations could form a coalition. I think it's straightforward in a sense, but still there are other possibilities as well. I would say that what Pavel presented is something that probably will happen. So I would say that even the view from Hungary is that it's the most viable option, and that it would be a huge, well, let's put it in a way, like scandal if another scenario would enter into reality. But I think that viewing the situation from an external perspective, we still have questions about what will the president of the Czech Republic decide. So we can still read things from different kinds of information coming from the media that for example, Babiš mentioned already for the media Zeman told him in the hospital that he would like him to form a government and things like that, which I think is just, you know, a formality that he wanted to show his electorate. But I don't think that any other possibility can be viable than forming the government by the two opposition forces. We'll see whether the Pirates will be a permanent member of it. I think this is the biggest question here, because their ideological profile is a bit outside of the scope of the Spolu coalition and even the mayors and independents. So they are more right-leaning centrist ones, while the Pirates have a very strong progressive profile. And I think this could be a question here, whether during the talks they will decide that the Pirates actually leave that sort of establishment. I don't think that would be the case, but still it could make sense from the point of view of government stability, because if Pirates would leave the coalition, they will still have the majority in the chamber. So I think that's a huge question, and I think probably the parties are discussing that right now. They have, well, yeah, that's all. Let's hear what Vít has to say about that.
Two questions for our two Czech panelists. One is about the future coalition. If the Pirates are going to be member of or going to be included in the government, because also without them there would be a comfortable, not a comfortable, but a majority in the parliament. And as Nikolett mentioned, they are pretty much on the ideological spectrum far away or more farther away than this central-right liberal coalition from Spolu and the independent mayors. This is one. And one question from the audience was regarding the way forward of Miloš Zeman, if he is going to ask Babiš to form a government, because he said beforehand that he will ask the leader of the party, of the single party and not the coalition, which is a difference, to form a new government. What's the legal procedure here? If he is going to be asked, Andrej Babiš, to try to form the government, what's the way next? So the two questions about the Pirates and the way forward for Babiš and Zeman. Who would like to take which one? Vít, first choice.
I will take the Miloš Zeman's question,
please,
and Pavel can then answer the Pirates maybe, so that we split the forces. So the situation is unclear. We don't know what's going on with the president. What we know for certain is that he has long-term health issues. He is known as a passionate user of alcohol and also cigarettes. So that doesn't contribute well to your health. He is now lying in one of the hospitals on the ICU. So it means very likely that he is on life support. So he, and there were, when on Sunday when he was brought to the hospital, some journalists managed to film his condition, because nobody knew in what condition he is. He was unconscious, not able to really know what's going on in his surrounding. So in a nutshell, it seems that he is in bad physical shape, and the question is not at the moment how he will be able to contribute to the post-election negotiations, but whether he will be able to recover, and when it is going to be. And if you consider this, then the Czech constitution has certain provisions that can deal with the situation. If the president is not able to perform his duties, then both chambers of the parliament can decide by a simple majority that the president is not able to perform, and then the powers of the president are split in various ways between the chairman of the Chamber of the Deputies and the Senate and the Prime Minister. So in this sense, if Miloš Zeman, and I think that's how it will just evolve, is that if Miloš Zeman will not appoint Petr Fiala the next Prime Minister, then the Parliament will simply vote on will rule that the president is not capable of performing his duties, and the power of appointing new prime minister will go to the chairman of the Chamber of Deputies, which will be opposition held. So there is no problem. And now it's not a question whether the opposition parties will get the government. It's just a matter of time, and it will be rather sooner than later because of the physical shape of our president.
So still uncertain times ahead of us, and we don't really know when the new coalition is going to take power. Pavel, one question to you about the issue whether the pirates will be in the government or not. It's about whether this coalition between the mayors, independent mayors, and the pirates are going to hold or not. What's your comment?
Thank you, Tamás. Before I jump into the pirate question, maybe just a small addition to what Vít mentioned. So it might look like from outside that the sort of constitutional order in Czechia is in a complete paralysis because of the role of the president and so on and so forth. But it's in fact the constitution actually assumes that sort of this kind of situation might happen, or that there is a provision that within a maximum 30-day period from the date of the elections, there will be the first session of the next cabinet, during which the old government will basically submit its the demise, and a new sort of composition of the Chamber of Deputies will come to place. And since that moment, what Vít mentioned is so true, that basically then, no matter what happens, there is still always the chairman of the Chamber of Deputies, and also the simple majority voting in the upper chamber in the Czech Senate. There are no problems with that. There were already attempts before, during the last session, to basically to question the state of Miloš Zeman healthcare, but also sort of his role in the political system in a wider sense. So let's not go in detail in there. But back to your question on pirates, I think there will be included somehow. And the reason why I'm saying, despite the ideological differences, is that there is a sort of a sense of owing to the pirates from the mayor's movement. So there is a sort of a common approach, and this was often advocated by the chairman of the mayor's movement, Stan Vít Rakušan, who said, look, we ran together, and we want to stay together and go to the either coalition of negotiations for the government or to the opposition. That was a common sentiment. So here, I would say my assumption, my expectation is that they will go there together, despite the fact that it's only 4 members of the parliament, and they might live without them. So here, simply looking at the mathematics, yes, we can live without pirates, but I think there will be this sort of sense of going together, and sort of also there are negotiations, how many, for example, executive seats to give to them because of this, heritage of the preferential voting that I referred to at the beginning. But one thing that we should not forget is that the Pirate Party has internal mechanisms of referendum, so a party referendum on different topics. They're very easily organized, very swift and efficient through electronic voting and so on and so forth. And it might be the case that majority of the membership of the Pirate Party decides to go against, because that will likely be the case, that this will finally be voted. both on the leadership of the party, in which so sort of, as I saw, 90% supported, despite the enormous loss, supported the current head Ivan Bartoš, but then also that might be the case for the composition of the future government, which the Pirates actually might be voting on as well. But my assumption, despite all those, is that we will have Czech Pirates inside of the cabinet after all.
Thank you very much, Pavel. Fortunately, we have lots of questions from our audience. I will try to ask them in due time. But before we go there and we talk about foreign policy prospects of the Czech Republic, the last round about the coalition talks, Vít, you wanted to say something about the Pirates. And also, I would like to ask a question to you. So if the Pirates are going to be included in the next government, it's going to be a 5-party government. As far as I know, this is the first time in the Czech Republic, please correct me if I'm mistaken, if that a 5-party coalition government will come into power. How stable is this coalition going to be? So Pirates, Vít, and then the stability of the coalition for the rest. Thanks.
So first to the Pirates, I just cannot see any way how the Pirates would not be included in the government at the moment. I read pretty thoroughly their online Pirates forum, where the Pirates basically publicly discuss what will be next. And from my perspective, there is a quite broad consensus that the party should enter the government, and they should support the new formed government. So that's the first point. So I don't think that the Pirates will just withdraw. The second point is politics is no social welfare system, and so the seats matter. But what also matters is the public support. And it seems like the first after elections opinion polls suggest that the electorate of the Liberal coalition consisted, let's say, from 60% of Pirate votes and 40% of the mayor's votes. So there is, although the Pirates have only 4 seats in the parliament, the majority of votes who went to this coalition were Pirate votes. And you simply cannot ignore that. Maybe in the long term, in 2 or 3 years, when the discussion is totally different from today, but right after the elections, you just cannot omit that you were elected only because of the Pirate votes. Otherwise, you would basically fight for survival in the parliament in the case of the mayor's coalition. So they cannot omit them. Simultaneously, as the narrative as the narrative was before the elections, it was all about we are the 2 opposition coalitions. We want to get rid of Babiš. We want to form the government, and we will do everything in order to remove Babiš from the power. In 2 days after the elections, you simply cannot break this promise, and you will have to carry on. That basically leads me to the second part of your question, how stable the government will be. I think it's going to be stable in the 1 or 2 years perspective. We will see what happens in 2 years when the elections are forgotten. We have had very likely presidential elections, and the government obviously will have suffered many internal disputes when it comes to taxation and social welfare, etc. So it might change in 2 or 3 years, but at the moment, the 2 blocks seem extremely cohesive, and there is a very high degree of will to agree on the new government.
Nikki and Pavel, would you like to add anything to the stability of the future government?
I just wanted to briefly comment on sort of your point on the five-party coalition. So I was just checking the historical compositions of the Czech governments, and the highest number I found was 4. That was the first Klaus government since 1992. But in general, it's a common thing to have 3-party governments. That is quite a usual number, and in the Czech parliamentary system, it is a very common. I know that in the case of, for example, Hungarian political sort of history, it is maybe less common, more rare to have this sort of more fragmented political scene, but it is quite a common thing for the Czech parliamentary history, at least since 1993. So it is really common to have multi-party governments. This will be likely the biggest number, even if we have to always say that this is a sort of 4+1 due to the numbers, due to the simple division of powers and voting things, so rights and power. So here, I think that should not be so much of a problem unless we have a look at particular policy issues, be that the green agenda, be that maybe some aspects of foreign policy, for example, the regional sort of discussions, which might be interesting, and we will probably be touching upon later on, or also other aspects of the sort of maybe European policy, including, for example, position on euro and others. So here we might have a more differentiated picture, but as the sort of composition and already the socialization within the coalitions has showed, the parties are very pragmatic, and they might be sort of taking a little bit a step back on certain priorities, as it was the case, for example, with the center-right party Top 09 on the euro question, just for the common sort of interest. And the one goal that we set earlier is the ousting of the current prime minister and his party. So I think they will find a common language. The socialization during the campaign has helped that a lot, and I think this will be a working government, which I'm quite optimistic will operate quite okay, I would say.
Nikolett, would you like to add anything?
It's hard to add anything else because Vít and Pavel, they were very thorough. I actually agree with Pavel in that sense that it's not uncommon to have so many parties in a government coalition. So I would say that I would reinforce what he actually said, that there might be certain specific issues which would be hard to agree on. He mentioned basically all of them. So I think this is the most important aspect, that there could be a general progress in working together. However, certain key issues, and I suspect that most of them will emerge in the field of foreign policy and European issues. Those will be hard to agree on and get a compromise.
We are getting to the last block of topics of our discussion. Let's assume to narrow down the narratives to one. This is the scenario about Petro Fiala leading a 5-party coalition. Sooner or later, they will be in power. And my first question to you will be regarding the regional politics and regional foreign policy prospects of the Czech Republic. Let's talk about the V4. So what is your comment? How do you assume the Czech Republic's future prospects and future positions in the V4? What kind of policies are they going to initiate there? How will it change the dynamics between the 4 countries? And because we have also one question from the audience regarding the future relationship between Hungary and the Czech Republic. This was to Nikolett, but also our Czech panelists can relate to that. So V4 and bilateral relationships between the Czech Republic and Hungary. Who would like to start?
Okay, I'll take it from here, and then the others can add something. I will take a two-level approach. One is if we the two levels are, the first one is the, let's say, public discourse. That means what the politicians say, how they present themselves, with whom they take selfies, etc. And then the second level is the practical political level. So the public administration, how the decisions are actually made. When it comes, I will take one by one. I will start with the public discourse level. I think we will see a change, definitely. Andrej Babiš, as already Pavel mentioned, tried to present himself as a close friend of Viktor Orbán. That will definitely stop. I don't think that there is an appetite in strengthening the Czech-Hungarian relationships or friendship, just because the opposition parties, they consist of parties who support something, at least vocally, called liberal democracy. And they, even in the opposition, they tried somehow to position themselves from Andrej Babiš that he is leaning way too much towards Poland and Hungary. So this will definitely change. On the other hand, the second level, the practical political level, I think it will remain the same, because if I can say anything about Babiš, that is that one thing is what he tells his voters and how he tries to present himself. And the second thing is what he actually does in the negotiations. The V4 hasn't been really cohesive, I think, on the practical political level in the last several years, except issues that the V4 agreed on not wanting, such as, for example, the migration. The migration issue will probably remain. The Czech Republic will not move anywhere from the neglecting position. But still, I feel that the policy preferences between Hungary and the Czech Republic, for example, were quite distant in the history. And this will basically remain the same. I don't think that there will be any difference. And also, the V4 is not just only about coordinating positions on the EU level, but it's also about the regional cooperation. And in this sense, the V4 is a great tool for the Czechs, and there will be definitely an appetite for maintaining regional ties on the practical level. So discussing where to build highway, joint sessions of ministries, etc. That will remain, but on the first level, the political level, where you basically try to promote yourself, there will be definitely a change.
Nikki, how do you see that? And if you can also comment on the future prospects of Czech-Hungarian relationships. Thank you.
I think that we have to make a distinction here between the V4 as an institution and the relation between the Czech Republic and members of the V4, so member countries. So, of course, none of the political parties who will be part of this possible government say that the V4 is a bad thing. They all promote the cooperation within the framework of the V4 as such. I know that you are shaking heads. We come to the second point, which is that most of the political parties doesn't have a problem with the V4 as a concept. However, they have a problem with the governments who are part of it. So I think that's a huge difference, and we should say this out loud as much as we can, because I don't like when people say that the V4 is a toxic brand. No, it's an institution. It cannot be a toxic one because it's about cooperation. Maybe the governments who are member of it, you don't agree with the policies. And I think that the Spolu and the pirates and the mayors will advocate that they have a problem with certain policies of the Hungarian government and the Polish government, and they want put that under the rug. So I would say that there will be a more confrontative relationship between Czech Republic and Hungary in the future, and of course between the Czech Republic and the Poland as well. I think that one of the issues that we have to take into account here is that the Czech Republic will take the presidency of the European Union at the second half of 2022, and this will seriously reduce the confrontative nature of Czech foreign politics, I would say so, especially if they are in the trio with France and Sweden. So this is, I think, a bad or a less good prospect for the Czech-Hungarian bilateral relations on a political level. However, I would say that from seeing from an economic perspective, not much will be changed in terms of economic prospects. So that's my take on it. Yeah, but I'm happy to hear the Czech perspective on that as well.
We are just about to open the Pandora box about the V4 being a toxic brand after the Pandora Papers. But before we go there, Pavel, you were shaking your head, please.
Thank you so much. Just maybe a couple of comments. I was shaking my hands to some degree. I largely agree with what Vít and Nikolett mentioned, but just imagine in the political language, it's so hard to differentiate between the institution and the governments. That is, and you hear more and more voices from the Czech Pirate Party, but also from people from within the sort of top 09, the more liberal circles, within all five of the parties saying, look, we need to get rid of this, which is really not productive, which is not helpful, but due to the enormous influence that well, not maybe enormous, but very extensive influence of Hungary on the composition of the regional grouping. That was quite sensitive. Just don't forget that there was a direct line between the Prime Minister Andrej Babiš and the head of his office. Tunde is her first name. I forgot her surname, but she's a Slovak Hungarian, right? So, and she was the channel back to Orbán Viktor's office, And when he also referred to the economic relationship between Czechia and Hungary, don't forget that our prime minister, the current one at least, has a very important business interest, not only in Czechia, not only in Slovakia, but also in Hungary. And this is growing and growing. So there was a whole series of articles exploring the Czech-Hungarian relationship, which is from the Czech side to some degree, and I don't want to overblow that, but to some degree influenced by also private interests of the Czech Prime Minister, who is a heavy investor in the agricultural sector in Hungary. And this is purely facilitated by the personal high-level political establishment and connections. Don't forget about this. That is one thing. Another one that goes back to the Hungarian Prime Minister, I think he made a mistake. If I'm very frank, he bet on a wrong horse, which is really not that is not going to be helpful in the bilateral relations. If you support openly the other party, then it makes it creates a certain picture. So this is how this will be sort of in shadow of the future government that will not be composed of ANO. We know that for sure. So here, Hungarian picture in Czechia will be automatically in defensive just because of this, I think, a mistaken move that is always very, very risky. When our President Miloš Zeman supported the losing candidate for presidency in Austria, and that was more ceremonial level, still it cast this kind of shadow over the bilateral neighborly relations. So this move is always very risky, and this time for Viktor Orbán that didn't play out well. That is another thing. In general, I would say, and I would agree with what Vít mentioned, we will see more of a sort of a division of the V4 on this friendly coordination sort of moves. We will see much more of Czechia and Slovakia and sort of Poland and Hungary on the other side. That is on the value question, but that is also on multiple others. And this is a very just pure pragmatism that both of the countries are doing, because honestly, if you go to Brussels, it is always Hungary, it is always Poland. And Czechia and Slovakia, they have no interest and zero interest and to be there in that camp, in that kind of camp, you know, when you don't want to be grilled on rule of law, you don't want to be grilled on a sort of media concentration in the hands of the government and the advertising policy and all that, you know, you don't want to be there. So for very pragmatic, very sort of you know, survival even reasons, you just want to differentiate, at least behind the closed doors, at least in the corridors. You say, look, these are our friends from Slovakia. We have a lot of things in common, and then they are the bad guys. This will not be said publicly, as we mentioned. You know, there will be still continuation and also pragmatism in the sort of infrastructural projects. You know, cross-border cooperation. I think this will simply stay there. But if we are frank about the high-level politics and where we want to be there, I don't think that the future government will want to be there. With the Hungarian one. Don't forget that at least 3 of the 5 parties are strongly critical towards illiberal tendencies and the position of Viktor Orbán. And this is all going back to the visit as well. That was a final sort of a demonstration of it. Don't forget also that the top 09 was in favor of excluding Fidesz from EPP. Christian Democrats, much more differentiated, depends on who you talk to. Similar in the civic Democrats, you know, that will be a more sort of differentiated picture here. But at least 3 of the 5 parties will be very much vocal, or at least acting on the value agenda and somehow naturally differentiating from what's happening in Hungary.
Before we finally move to the European level, Pavel, indirectly you mentioned this very famous old topic about V2+2. So not the V4, but there are like 2 blocks here. I would like to ask you about the future prospects of revitalizing the Slavkov triangle, because we had this before with the 3 social democratic governments in Czechia, in Slovakia, and back then in Austria. Now the color of the governments are pretty much different. They're more and more rainbow, but still with a more liberal government now in Czechia and in Slovakia, and who knows what might happen to Sebastian Kurz and his ÖVP in Austria. Do you think that the focus of future Czech politics will be shifting away from the V4, and again there will be a new appetite for the Slavkov triangle? Just very short answers, please, because we have to move to the European level. So who would like to start? Vít, maybe?
I mean, Slavkov format is a bit puzzle to me, because it was a project run by the Social Democrats who tried to counterbalance the destructive narrative of the V4 during the migration crisis. I think it was an attempt for the Czechs to say, okay, we are part of the V4 and we have some kind of a common interest in the migration issue, but we have also friends in Austria and in Slovakia, and we are not just one bloc trying to propose common policies on everything. Then after the Social Democrats lost in the last election, 2017, the Prime Minister office, the Slavkov format somehow got stuck and it remained partially inactive since then. And obviously, the question is how the next government will approach this issue. I think that they will try to utilize the Slavkov format somehow, but on the other hand, you need also an interest on the Austrian side to carry on, and that is somehow disputable. What I rather feel is that the new government will simply try to look more to the west and to the north, so try to communicate more vocally with something like Finland, maybe Sweden, maybe Denmark, and obviously Germany. So we will see, but the Slavkov format will remain a bit on side, I would say, because it was social democratic project, and it doesn't have the history of the V4 and the depth of the integration as the V4 has.
Pavel, maybe last comment for this round, and then we move to the European level, please.
Thank you so much, Tamás. Just maybe briefly and more, if I take a step back, you know, if you have a look at the sort of Czech foreign policy thinking, there is a traditional interest in pursuing multiple formats. It is the V4 plus formats with Ukraine, with other partners, with Germany and others that is standing on one side. It is the Slavko format, is the strategic dialogue with Germany, but also very used to be at least close relationship with Poland and other parties. So it is the Central European 5 and other formats that Czechia has been traditionally interested in sort of instrumentalizing for their own goals. So while I agree with Vít, I think there is a lot of pragmatism hidden behind where this is actually useful. We might go back to sort of the smaller regional groupings if it is playing in our cards, if it is useful. So V4 is obviously one of the crucial formats, that has been there for over 30 years, but then there are multiple others, and Czechia is never hesitant to use them and put them in practice when this is actually useful for pursuing the foreign policy goals.
Yes,
last one in the block. Yeah.
One last issue. So if you check the Pirates and the Mayors foreign policy program, they specifically stated that they don't want to limit Czechia to cooperate only with the V4. So they are open to other ideologically close and related governments. So I would say that not really the regional formats will be the dominating factor for the future coalition government, but rather an issue-based cooperation based on ideological closeness. So even though like Slavkov is a lovely brand, let's put it that way, and the V4 is a lovely brand as well, as we have actually come to the conclusion in our ongoing research project, in which Vít is also a part about unilateral cooperation in the European Union, we have actually come to this conclusion that issue basis is basically a better explanation of cooperation than just this regionally functioning entities.
Thank you very much. Now we shall move to the last topic of our conversation, which is about future prospects of Czech foreign policy in terms of the European policy. So my question is, again, assuming Petr Fiala will be able to form a coalition of a 5-party coalition, what sort of European policy would the Czech Republic follow? Do they want a more federal union or a union of the member states? What is going to be their future position about the euro? Do they want to introduce it in Czech Republic or not? About the Green Deal, if you can say some words. And we had one question about, I know it's a lot of topics, but this is live. So we have also one comment about the defense policy plans and the security policy plans of the Czech Republic. Are they going to meet the NATO criteria of the 2%? And last comment and last question here. Sorry, I had a bunch of questions here because here there was also one comment. If Petr Fiala is going to be the next prime minister of the Czech Republic, his party, the ODS, is a member of the European Conservative and Reformists, if I'm not mistaken. This is a fairly Eurosceptical format in the European Parliament. What sort of message would it be in terms of the upcoming Czech presidency of the European Union? Bunch of questions. It's up to you which one would you pick, but I would be happy if we can refer to all of these. Who would like to begin? Vít, maybe.
Okay, I'll pick one topic that I like, and that's the Eurozone, and we can then discuss it further because you posted a lot of questions and I cannot remember all of them. So the euro, that will be very interesting because let's say the seats majority in the government are basically more or less pro-Eurozone countries, Eurozone parties. So we have the Christian Democrats who have had nothing against euro. Then you have the top 09, which has been advocating for Eurozone membership. Then you have the Mayor's Party, which is also pro-Eurozone. The Pirates, they are strongly pro-Eurozone, so if they had a chance, they would probably enact like ideologically the euro within the next 4 years. The only party that has some resistance towards the Czech membership in the Eurozone is the ODS, and there is a big question also whether how strong this conviction is, because the ODS party is somehow split in two different segments. The one, let's call it Václav Klaus wing, that's represented by the ODS MEPs like Zahradil, maybe also Alexander Vondra, and they definitely are Eurosceptics, and they would like the EU to be more intergovernmental. They would like the EU to do less, and etc., etc. But then you have a quite also large wing of ODS that is pro-integration. That, although they don't say it vocally, they wouldn't object, I would say, the Eurozone membership. So this is the baseline, what the government will consist of. Now, the Eurozone is very unpopular here in the Czech Republic. Around only 21% of the population constantly would like to see the Czech Republic in the Eurozone. So that's a very unpopular policy that will be difficult to implement. That being said, there is some kind of a middle way, which is the ERM2 membership, which is, let's call it the Danish model. The Pirates and the Mayors had it even in their program. So what might happen eventually is that the Czech Republic simply ties the exchange rate to euro, like the Danes did. And although we will not be part of the Eurozone, we will not pay with the euros, we will in reality have something like euro. And I see some small narrow road towards this result. And we will see during the coalition talks now how important the topic will be for those particular parties. But the fact is that the majority of the government would like the Czech Republic to be part of the Eurozone because of the internal resistance from the ODS and maybe partially because of the unpopularity of euro in the Czech Republic. It's very unlikely that we will join the euro in the Eurozone in the next 4 years. But it might well happen that we simply tie the exchange rate to euro.
So still we have a couple of topics left, federal Europe, not federal Europe, future security and defense policy of the Czech Republic, and maybe the Green Deal as well. Pavel, please.
I will try to eat another part of the cake and get rid of some other questions. So I definitely agree with Vít that there will be sort of a very pragmatic and slow way forward. You know, it will be clearly pro Euro-Atlantic. It will be, you know, also in terms of identity, that was always a very strong narrative. You know, we don't want to go anywhere to the east. We want to integrate. We want to be closer to the sort of European and also transatlantic alliances and so on and so forth. So here I would say that also by very slow steps, maybe symbolical steps, we will also be sort of closer to Brussels, no matter how we call that, Euro, federalist Europe. I don't think we will go anyhow that far, but at least some of the elements and like symbolical sort of acknowledgement. Yes, we are part of Brussels. You know, this is our Europe. We are part of that, and obviously the upcoming presidency will be a good opportunity to transform the narrative that also Vít referred to. The sort of more Eurosceptic Czech public, you know, that is there, and might be difficult for the parties to deal with some policy issues, including the euro and others. But here I would like to stop at also at the issue of defense and security, because there seem to be very strong consensus among the parties that we need to invest much more substantially when it comes to modernization of the Czech armed forces, to recommit, better to say, to the 2% of GDP spending on the defense in a wider sense. So I think there is a very strong cross-party consensus. We saw that when we analyzed parts of the sort of foreign policy and defense programs of the parties. There's also a very strong common ground when it comes to antagonizing the sort of the Eastern authoritarian powers, be that Russia, be that China. There will be, I think, quite a high level of consensus, which, if we translate once again into Czech-Hungarian relations, will do no good, let's say, because there will be a very strong push against, like what Russia has been doing in our region. We have a very unfortunate, history with Russia, especially after the last couple of months. So I assume that there will be much more of this sort of value-driven foreign policy, but also from that stemming orientation on the alliances, both EU and NATO. But quite an interesting fact, and here there is a sort of division a little bit between the Together and the more liberal of the two coalitions when it comes to the sort of security orientation. For example, in the case of Spolu, the Together coalition, there is a very strong transatlantic bond and orientation of the United States and NATO, and much less of support for any sort of direction towards the European army or common military autonomy and so on and so forth. So there's a very strong orientation of the United States, which is not that emphasized by the more liberal of the two coalitions. So here I see some nuances in between. So this will need to be discussed very thoroughly. And I once again, I think there will be some kind of consensus. We can see that the European army or any kind of concept around that is just very slow, if feasible at all. So I think you might have some rhetorics. Yes, we are okay with this, but in fact, not so much will happen after all. So here, I think once again the pragmatism of the parties will be in place, even if somehow everybody realizes that the United States will just so much more orientate themselves on the Pacific area and China, and much less on Russia, which I think gives very good reason to actually promote this kind of discussion about doing more together, be that both in foreign policy but also security-wise. So here I will just stop here, and maybe Nikolett might take the hard questions on green agenda and others which are left. So yeah, thank you.
Nikki, again, the unpopular task is yours.
Okay.
To finish this.
Yeah. So before going on, moving on with the green agenda, I would just quickly add some points to what has been said, because I think the most interesting developments will happen in terms of foreign policy if this government, this coalition government, will be formed. So when it comes to security and defense issues, if you carefully read the program of Spolu, it is explicitly stated that they like to go with a NATO first approach. So they would prefer to do cooperation and developments in the framework of NATO rather than, supporting the development of the European leg of these developments. I think that could be very interesting. And another thing which is important to mention, and it was already highlighted by Pavel, but it cannot be enough stressed, that the Spolu also campaigned with that they would like to go back or renew the Havel diplomacy, so a more normative and value-based foreign policy will be on ahead. And they also said that they would like to establish some kind of a new position, and I'm not sure if it's the proper translation for English, but it's a national security advisor position, just like in the US, basically. And they promised a new security strategy as well, the adoption of a new security strategy. So I think we will see interesting developments in that regard. Of course, they are election promises, so we cannot be sure how much they can actually do and what will be the real content, especially because the pirates and the mayors, they have a bit of different stance in this regard. And just fishing from their program, I think one of the most important things is that they promise that they would like to somehow adopt a Czech version of a sanctions act, specifically targeting at Russia. And I think that China, and they would like to punish the gross violations of human rights in this regard. So I think this could be a very interesting element of the upcoming Czech foreign policy if they actually manage to do that. Well, that's an interesting question whether they can do it or not. But when it comes to the pirates and the mayors, I'm sure that they will advocate a very strong stance against China and Russia as well, which we have already seen that they were doing that even as the Zdeněk Hřib, who is the mayor of Prague, together with this. Well, I don't want to go that into detail because it's very well known. So I think we can see very interesting developments in this regard. And when it comes to the European Green Deal, one thing is sure, that the next government will have a serious dilemma and problem with making all the green policies popular, especially since if you check the news, all around in Central Europe, the energy prices and the gas prices are increasing very steadily, and this already caused a huge inflation, and the Czech Central Bank had to raise the interest rate, and just like this happened in Hungary and in Poland and in Slovakia and in Romania as well. So I think that the next government have to tackle this very serious issue and somehow try to explain the consequences to the voters, that how is it possible that they have a new government and the prices are increasing all the time and everything will be just more expensive. So I think that's a huge thing. But regardless of this, I think that both the Spolu and the pirates and the mayors, they are kind of very positive towards the European Green Agenda. So they are supporting the circular economy, for example, and biodiversity. So I think the most important thing here will be whether how to address the question of big car companies who are residing in the Czech Republic, and what will be the future of those companies, and what will be the future of the coal production and coal mining. So we will have, I think, debates in connection with that, and also about the debate of the nuclear energy. I'm not quite sure what is the concrete stances of each party when it comes to the development of the new nuclear plants in Dukovany. So it would be nice if I could hear some ideas from Pavel and Vít. So I think these will be the most important questions.
I think about the energy politics, that would be another panel and another event, well, because our time is actually up. But before we finish, just a very short last round of questions. Nikolett, you already mentioned about the future prospects of Czech foreign policy towards China and Russia. I read an analysis on Euronews about the elections. One key takeaway was, and I would like to quote, Czechs will likely turn back to the West and stop their flirtation with Russia and China. Just very briefly, please, your comments about that picture is going to be complete, and we finish with the macro level. Who would like to start? Pavel, please.
Thank you so much. Tamás, maybe just the last words on this one. I think so far we heard some quite radical, very strong worded statements, from both the pirates, but also some parts of the other coalition on China, but also on other actors. We spoke about the Visegrad cooperation. This is much easier to be done from opposition than when you are sitting in the executive office. So here I assume that there will be sort of much less of the tone, but some very practical steps, maybe a lower level, but going in that direction, basically achieving the limits of the possible when it comes to the, well, completely frozen relationship with both Russia and China, I feel. So there will be sort of a minimalization of the contacts, maybe opening towards sort of a Russian civil society and immigration and cooperation with the opposition, but also much more focus, and we have not spoken about it so far so much, the domestic resilience. If we speak about corruption, if we speak about protection of critical infrastructure, that is an ongoing issue, together with the inability of the state to really always tackle the hybrid threats and disinformation. So I think this will be much more on agenda. That is our domestic homework, and I can see maybe getting a lot of political will to do things about that. Concretely on China, there were ideas floating around to, for example, leave the sort of 16 or 17+1 format. That is one of the ideas. It might be a little bit radical, and I think there needs to be first like a thorough analysis of what this would actually mean. Also economic-wise, we, on the other hand, and this is mentioned in I think in both of the programs actually of the coalitions, that there might be a push towards a stronger relationship with Taiwan. Because already at this stage, Taiwan is investing 4 or 5 times more than the People's Republic of China. So we see that by the number of employed Czech citizens and others. So that is a very different story in Poland, or maybe also a different case in Hungary. But in Czechia, that is a very particular vision and sort of state of play on how the Chinese relationship actually looks like. So here I assume that there will be less of rhetorics, maybe much more concrete actions, maybe lower profile actions, but very consistent ones on the bilateral level, but much more done in the multilateral format of the European Union, NATO, and the like. So I think that will be the future of the Czech foreign policy towards both of the actors. I definitely agree with Nikolett on the more normative, much more vocal sort of human rights, democracy agenda, because both of the sort of the democratic opposition coalitions advocated, let's go back to the times of Václav Havel and the very strong normative and value-driven agenda. I think we will hear that at some point when the government comes to place.
Vít, do you agree with the more normative Czech foreign policy in the future to Russia and China?
Definitely. To be honest, I am expert on the EU, not the foreign policy that much. So I don't know exactly what the Czech Republic's position towards China will be, but I presume that since the politicians who benefited from the close ties to China are going to be out of the office, it will change in the future. But I will just stick to what Pavel said.
Okay. Maybe Nikolett as last words. Yes.
Last but not least, yes. So I completely agree with Pavel in the sense that the Taiwan question will be a prominent issue for the next government, and just to reflect on not just on the East. If you see the tradition of the civic democrats with establishing relations with other countries, I would say that we probably will see an enhanced amount of cooperation in the transatlantic links, maybe with the US and with Germany, and of course Israel, which is even mentioned in their programs as well. And it's a traditional partner actually for the civic democrats and for the Czech Republic from the EU, I would say. So definitely these will be also important parts of it.
And these are the last words of our webinar this morning. Thank you very, very, very much for the vivid, informative and very fruitful conversation to Nikolett, to Vít, and to Pavel. And also thanks a lot for our viewers who stay with us, also for the extra time. And big thanks for the many questions we received. I tried to ask all of them, and sorry if I might have missed any of it. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and check our upcoming events. I wish you all a pleasant day.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.